The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the Grand Hotel in Pinos Altos, New Mexico, and Helena Foster stepped down into the dusty afternoon heat of 1878, her silk dress already clinging to her skin despite the parasol shading her face. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia to marry a man she had only corresponded with through letters, a man whose elegant handwriting and promises of love had convinced her father that this union would be beneficial for everyone involved. What Helena did not know was that Preston Ashford had studied her family's financial holdings more carefully than he had ever studied her heart, and that the silver mine her father owned in these territories was worth more to him than any woman could ever be. The hotel manager rushed out to greet her, his face flushed with excitement at hosting such a distinguished guest. Helena had barely settled into her room when a messenger arrived with a note from Preston, explaining that urgent business would delay their meeting until the following evening. She tried to ignore the small twist of disappointment in her chest. After all, she had traveled so far, and one more day should not matter. She spent that first evening alone, watching the sunset paint the Pinos Altos mountains in shades of amber and rose, wondering if she had made the right decision in leaving everything familiar behind. The next morning, Helena decided to explore the town rather than remain confined to her hotel room. She had always been spirited, despite her wealthy upbringing, and the wild landscape of New Mexico called to something restless inside her. She walked past the saloons and trading posts, past the miners who tipped their hats respectfully when they saw her fine clothes. The town was rougher than anything she had known in Philadelphia, but there was an honesty to it that she found strangely appealing. People here worked with their hands, spoke plainly, and looked each other in the eye. It was while she was admiring a display of turquoise jewelry outside a small shop that she first saw him. Wade Xavier was leading his horse down the main street, dust covering his worn boots and leather chaps, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. He was tall and lean, with the kind of build that came from years of hard work rather than leisure. Helena found herself staring longer than was proper, noting the strong line of his jaw and the way he moved with quiet confidence. He glanced up and caught her watching, and for a moment their eyes met. His were the color of whiskey, warm and golden, and something passed between them that Helena could not name but felt all the way through her body. Wade touched the brim of his hat in greeting and continued on his way, leaving Helena standing there with her heart beating faster than it should. She shook herself mentally and turned back to the jewelry, scolding herself for such foolishness. She was betrothed to Preston Ashford, would be married within the month, and had no business noticing other men, no matter how appealing they might be. That evening, Preston finally arrived at the hotel to meet his intended bride. He was exactly as his photograph had promised, handsome in a polished way, with dark hair slicked back and clothes that spoke of money and taste. He kissed Helena's hand with practiced gallantry and told her she was even more beautiful than he had imagined. Yet something about his smile did not quite reach his eyes, and his gaze seemed to catalog her jewelry and fine dress more thoroughly than it did her face. Helena pushed the thought away, attributing her unease to nervousness. This was the man she would marry, and she was determined to make the best of it. Over the next week, Preston courted Helena with all the proper formalities. He took her to dinners at the best restaurant in town, bought her flowers, and spoke eloquently about the life they would build together. But Helena noticed things that troubled her. He always seemed distracted when she spoke about her interests in literature or her dreams of starting a school for local children. His attention sharpened only when the conversation turned to business matters or her father's mining operations. When she mentioned wanting to visit the mine to see where her father's wealth originated, Preston quickly changed the subject, suggesting instead that such places were too rough for a lady of her refinement. It was during one of these carefully orchestrated outings that Helena encountered Wade Xavier again. Preston had taken her for a carriage ride through the outskirts of town, pointing out various properties and discussing investments with barely concealed excitement. They had stopped at a small creek to water the horses when Wade rode up, clearly on his way somewhere else. Preston's expression tightened when he saw the cowboy, and he made the introductions with obvious reluctance. "Miss Foster, this is Wade Xavier. He works at the Rocking J Ranch outside town." The dismissal in Preston's tone was clear, as though Wade was beneath their notice. Wade removed his hat politely, and Helena found herself noticing the sun-streaked brown of his hair and the honest warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. "Madam, I hope you are finding our territory hospitable." "I am, thank you, Mr. Xavier. The landscape here is quite different from what I am accustomed to, but there is a beauty to it." Helena's voice sounded breathless to her own ears. "Takes some people that way. The land out here has a way of getting into your blood." Wade's gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary before he nodded to Preston. "Ashford, I hear congratulations are in order on your upcoming marriage." Preston's hand tightened possessively on Helena's elbow. "Yes, well, we should be going. Miss Foster tires easily in this heat." Helena wanted to protest that she was perfectly fine, but Preston was already guiding her back to the carriage. She glanced back once and found Wade watching them with an expression she could not quite read. Something about the encounter left her feeling unsettled for the rest of the day. The following afternoon, Helena decided to take a walk alone despite Preston's suggestions that she rest at the hotel. She needed time to think, to sort through her confused feelings. She had traveled so far to marry a man her father approved of, a man who seemed perfect on paper. Yet she felt no real connection to Preston, no spark of genuine feeling beyond polite affection. Was that normal? Was she expecting too much from an arranged marriage? Lost in thought, Helena wandered farther than she intended, following a path that led into the scrubland beyond town. The sun was fierce overhead, and she was beginning to feel genuinely fatigued when she heard the sound of cattle and saw a group of riders working a small herd in the distance. As she watched, one of the calves broke away from the group, running in her direction with surprising speed. Helena froze, unsure what to do as the frightened animal charged toward her. Before she could even think to move, a horse and rider appeared between her and the calf. Wade Xavier guided his mount with expert precision, turning the young animal back toward the herd without seeming to exert any effort at all. He dismounted quickly and approached Helena with concern evident in his expression. "Are you hurt, Miss Foster? You should not be out here alone. These young cattle can be unpredictable, and the sun can be dangerous if you are not used to it." Helena found her legs were shaking, whether from the scare or from Wade's nearness she could not say. "I am fine, thank you. I did not realize I had walked so far. I should return to town." "Let me take you back. It is too far to walk in this heat, and you look pale." Wade's voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. Before Helena could protest, Wade lifted her onto his horse with surprising ease and swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his body behind hers, the strength of his arms as he held the reins on either side of her, the warmth of him even through her layers of clothing. They rode in silence for a few minutes, and Helena found herself relaxing against him despite knowing she should not. "May I ask you something, Miss Foster?" Wade's voice was quiet near her ear. "Of course, Mr. Xavier. Are you happy? About this marriage, I mean. Forgive me if I am speaking out of turn, but you do not seem like a woman in love." The directness of the question startled Helena into honesty. I barely know Preston. The marriage was arranged by my father. I suppose I thought love would come with time once we were properly wed. Maybe it would. Wade's tone suggested he doubted it. But a woman like you deserves to be loved for who she is, not for what she brings to a marriage. What do you mean by that? Helena twisted slightly to look at him and found his face closer than she expected. Wade seemed to consider his words carefully. I have known Preston Ashford for 2 years now since he came to this territory. He is ambitious, I will give him that. But I have never known him to do anything that did not serve his own interests. When he talks about you in the saloons, he speaks more of your father's silver mine than of your qualities as a person. The words struck Helena like a physical blow. Deep down, she had sensed something false about Preston's attentions, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real. Why would you tell me this? You barely know me. Because it is not right. You deserve to know the truth before you bind yourself to him for life. Wade's voice was fierce now. And because from the moment I first saw you outside that shop, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. I know I have no right, that you are promised to another man, that I am just a cowboy with nothing to offer but hard work and an honest heart. But I could not let you marry him without at least trying to open your eyes. Helena's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Wade could feel it. Everything she had been taught about propriety told her she should be scandalized, should demand to be returned to town immediately. But instead she found herself asking, what would you have me do? Talk to people in town. Ask about Preston's business dealings, and then decide for yourself if he is the man you want to spend your life with. Wade's arms tightened around her slightly. I will respect whatever you choose. But make sure it is truly your choice, not one made for you by others. They reached the edge of town, and Wade helped Helena down from his horse in a spot where they would not be too conspicuous. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary, and when Helena looked up into his face, she saw an emotion there that took her breath away. No one had ever looked at her like that, as though she was precious beyond measure. Thank you, Mr. Xavier, for everything. Helena's voice was barely above a whisper. Wade, please call me Wade. Wade. She tried the name and found she liked the feel of it on her tongue. I should go, but I will think about what you said. Helena walked back to the hotel in a daze, her mind whirling with Wade's revelations. That evening, when Preston came to call, she watched him more carefully than she had before. She mentioned wanting to discuss the details of their future together, their plans beyond the wedding itself. Preston spoke in grand, vague terms about society and status, about the respect her father's wealth would bring them. But when she pressed for specifics about where they would live, what their daily life would be like, he became evasive. These are details to be worked out after the marriage, my dear. You need not trouble yourself with such matters. A woman of your breeding should be concerned with social obligations, not business affairs. The condescension in his tone grated on Helena in a way it had not before. Wade had spoken to her as an equal, had trusted her with uncomfortable truths. Preston spoke to her as though she was a child to be managed and controlled. Over the next several days, Helena made discreet inquiries around town. The hotel owner's wife, pleased to have another woman to talk to, was surprisingly forthcoming. Oh, Mr. Ashford has been very busy since he arrived in Pinot's Altos, always meeting with investors, talking about various schemes. Some of them have worked out well for him, though I have heard others lost money when his promises did not pan out. The woman leaned closer conspiratorially. Between you and me, dear, I would be careful about letting him have control of any assets you might bring to the marriage. Men like that have a way of considering everything theirs once the vows are said. Helena visited the general store and struck up a conversation with the owner, mentioning her upcoming marriage. The man's congratulations seemed forced. Mr. Ashford has quite the head for business. Managed to acquire several properties around town at very favorable prices. Some folks say he has a talent for finding people in difficult situations and offering solutions that work out mostly for him. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. I am sure he will treat you well, Miss Foster. A woman of your standing would be an asset to any man's ambitions. The pattern became clear the more Helena investigated. Preston was known as clever and ambitious, but not necessarily honest or kind. He had built his reputation and modest fortune by taking advantage of others' misfortunes, and his pursuit of Helena was viewed by the townspeople as his most calculated move yet. They pitied her, though they were too polite to say so directly. The revelation should have angered Helena, but instead she felt a strange sense of relief. Her instincts had not been wrong. The unease she felt around Preston was justified, but what was she to do now? She had traveled 3 weeks to get here. Her father expected this marriage to happen, and her reputation would suffer if she broke the engagement without cause. In 1878, a woman's options were limited, and backing out of a betrothal was scandalous. Helena was sitting in the hotel garden, wrestling with these thoughts when Wade appeared at the gate. He looked uncertain, as though he had argued with himself about coming but could not stay away. Miss Foster, I apologize for seeking you out like this. I know it is improper, but I had to know. Have you learned anything that changed your mind about Ashford? Helena gestured for him to sit on the bench beside her. Propriety be damned. Everything you said was true. Everyone in town knows he wants my father's money, not me. But knowing the truth and being free to act on it are two different things. My father expects this marriage. Breaking it off would cause a scandal that could affect his business relationships. And Preston is clever enough that he has never done anything openly wrong to me. I have no grounds to refuse him that anyone would accept. Wade's jaw tightened with frustration. So you will go through with it. Marry a man who sees you as a transaction. I do not know. Helena's voice broke slightly. What choice do I have, Wade? I am a woman alone in a territory I do not know, with no family here to support me if I defy my father's wishes. Even if I refused Preston, what would I do? Where would I go? You could stay here, in Pino's Altos. Wade turned to face her fully, his eyes intense. I know I have nothing like what you are used to. I work for wages and live in a small cabin on ranch land. But I would take care of you, Helena. I would spend every day of my life making sure you never regretted choosing me over his wealth and position. Helena's breath caught in her throat. Wade, we barely know each other. We have spoken only a handful of times. I know enough. I know you are brave for coming out here to a strange place. I know you are kind because I have watched you speak gently to the Mexican children playing in the streets when other wealthy folks ignore them. I know you are clever because you took my warning seriously and investigated for yourself instead of just accepting what you were told. And I know that, when I look at you, I feel something I have never felt for any other woman. Wade took her hand carefully, as though she might break. I am not asking you to decide right now. I am just asking you not to marry him until you are certain. Give yourself time to know your own heart. Before Helena could respond, she heard Preston's voice calling her name from inside the hotel. Wade released her hand immediately and stood, putting proper distance between them. But the look he gave her held such longing that Helena felt it like a physical touch. Preston emerged into the garden, and his expression darkened when he saw Wade. What is going on here? Why are you bothering my betrothed, Xavier? I was just leaving Ashford. Miss Foster seemed distressed, and I was making sure she was well. No harm in that. Wade's voice was carefully neutral. There is plenty of harm in a man of your station speaking privately with a woman of hers. I will thank you to keep your distance from now on. Preston's voice was cold with warning. Wade tipped his hat to Helena, his eyes holding hers for one more meaningful moment, and then left without another word. Preston immediately began questioning Helena about what Wade had said, his tone possessive in a way that made her skin crawl. She deflected his inquiries, claiming Wade had simply offered directions when he saw her sitting alone, and eventually Preston let the matter drop. But his mood remained sour for the rest of the evening, and Helena saw a glimpse of the temper he usually kept hidden beneath his polished exterior. That night, lying in bed, Helena could not stop thinking about Wade's proposal. Not a formal proposal, perhaps, but an offer of an entirely different life. She tried to imagine what it would be like to wake up each day beside him, to build a simple life based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than social advantage and financial gain. The image that formed in her mind was surprisingly appealing. But was she brave enough to reach for it? The next day, Preston announced that he had arranged a party to celebrate their engagement, to be held at the hotel in 3 days' time. All of local society would attend, such as it was, and the event would make their commitment official in the eyes of the community. Helena felt the walls closing in. Once that party happened, breaking the engagement would be nearly impossible without devastating social consequences. She pleaded a headache that afternoon and retired to her room, but instead of resting, she changed into her simplest dress and slipped out of the hotel through a side entrance. She did not have a clear destination in mind, but her feet carried her toward the rocking J Ranch almost of their own accord. She had to see Wade again, had to talk to someone who saw her as more than a valuable acquisition. The ranch was several miles outside town, and Helena was dusty and tired by the time she arrived. A kindly older woman who turned out to be the ranch owner's wife saw her approaching and hurried out with concern evident on her weathered face. "My dear, are you lost? You look done in. Come inside and have some water." Helena accepted gratefully and found herself pouring out the entire story to this sympathetic stranger. Mrs. Jennings listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, her eyes shrewd and understanding. "So you have feelings for Wade, then, Mrs. Jennings asked when Helena finished. "I do not know. I think I might. But is it real, or am I just desperate to escape Preston?" Helena's voice was plaintive. "I have known Wade Xavier for 5 years, since he came to work for my husband. He is one of the finest men I have ever met, honest and hardworking and gentle with the animals. He has never so much as looked at a woman seriously in all that time. If he has declared himself to you, you can trust it is genuine." Mrs. Jennings patted Helena's hand. "The question is what your heart tells you, not what your father or society expects. I wish I could be certain. What if I am making a terrible mistake either way? Let me tell you something, dear. I was supposed to marry a banker's son back in St. Louis. My parents had it all arranged. But then I met John Jennings, who was just a ranch hand at the time, and I knew. I ran away the night before my wedding and never looked back. It has not been easy building this life out here, but I have never regretted choosing love over comfort. You have to decide what kind of life you want and what you are willing to risk for it." Helena was still contemplating these words when Wade came in from the range. His face lit up when he saw her, then immediately clouded with concern. "Helena, what are you doing out here? If Ashford finds out you came here alone, there will be hell to pay. I needed to see you, to talk to someone who was honest with me." Helena stood, suddenly feeling reckless and brave. "Wade, if I said yes to you, if I agreed to stay here and build a life with you, what would that look like?" I need to understand what I would be choosing." Wade glanced at Mrs. Jennings, who smiled and discreetly left the room. He moved closer to Helena, his expression serious. "I will not lie to you. It would be hard, at least at first. I make decent wages, and I have saved most of what I have earned. Enough to buy us a small piece of land eventually, to start our own ranch. But you would be living simply, doing work with your own hands. No servants, no fine dresses and dinner parties. People might look down on you for breaking your engagement and marrying beneath your station. Your father might even disown you. But would you be faithful? Would you be kind? Would you see me as a partner, not a possession?" Helena's voice shook with the importance of these questions. "Every day of my life. I would work myself to the bone to provide for you, to make you happy. I would listen to your thoughts and value your opinions. I would never raise a hand to you in anger or treat you with anything less than the respect you deserve." Wade took both her hands in his. "And I would love you, Helena, completely and truly for the rest of my days." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks before she could stop them. No one had ever spoken to her like this, had ever offered her this kind of partnership. Preston's pretty words paled in comparison to Wade's rough honesty. She realized in that moment that she had already made her choice, probably had made it the first time Wade's eyes met hers on that dusty street. "I want to say yes, but Preston has arranged this engagement party in 3 days. Once that happens, breaking things off will be nearly impossible. And I need to send word to my father to try to explain." Helena's mind was racing, trying to think through the practical obstacles. Wade's grip on her hands tightened. "Then we have 3 days to figure this out. But Helena, if you decide to go through with this, to choose me over him, you need to be absolutely certain. I will not have you regretting it later, resenting me for what you gave up. I am certain." The words came out stronger than Helena expected. "I am terrified, but I am certain. I just need to find the right way to handle Preston that does not result in complete disaster." They spent the next hour making plans, with Mrs. Jennings joining them to offer practical advice. Helena would return to town before she was missed, would continue to act as though nothing had changed. She would write to her father, explaining her decision and begging his understanding, and send the letter by the fastest post available. The day before the engagement party, she would formally break things off with Preston, giving him time to cancel the event and save some face. It was not perfect, but it was the best they could manage given the circumstances. Wade insisted on riding back to town with Helena as the sun began to set, though he left her at the edge of town to avoid anyone seeing them together. Before she dismounted, he pulled her back against him for just a moment, his lips brushing her temple. 3 more days and then we can start our life together. I promise you, Helena, you will not regret this." Helena returned to the hotel filled with nervous energy. She spent that evening composing a careful letter to her father, trying to explain how she had discovered Preston's true motives and found genuine affection elsewhere. She knew he would be disappointed, possibly furious, but she hoped he loved her enough to eventually understand. She posted the letter the next morning, knowing it would take weeks to receive a reply but feeling better for having sent it nonetheless. The following 2 days were torturous. Helena had to pretend everything was fine, had to endure Preston's company while knowing she would soon devastate him. She almost felt guilty, until she overheard him speaking with a business associate in the hotel parlor. The man was asking Preston about his pending nuptials, and Preston's response made Helena's blood run cold. "The foster girl is pleasant enough, I suppose, but the real prize is her father's silver mine. Once we are wed, I will have access to his business operations out here. Give me a year, and I will have established myself as an indispensable partner. Another year after that, and I will have maneuvered myself into a controlling position. The old man is getting on in years and has no sons. He will be grateful to hand things over to a capable son-in-law." Preston's voice was smug. "As for the wife, I will keep her tucked away somewhere respectable where she cannot interfere. A woman like that only needs to produce heirs and look decorative at social functions." Helena fled before she could hear more, her stomach churning with disgust and vindication. Any guilt she felt about leaving Preston evaporated. Wade had been right to warn her, and she had been right to investigate. She could hardly wait until morning when she could end this charade once and for all. But fate had different plans. That evening, Helena was summoned to the hotel manager's office. She went down to find Preston waiting for her, his expression thunderous. In his hand was the letter she had written to her father. "What is this?" Preston's voice was dangerously quiet. "I have contacts at the post office who notify me of interesting correspondence. Imagine my surprise when I learned my betrothed was sending urgent letters back east." Helena's heart sank. She should have known Preston would have spies everywhere, would monitor anything that might affect his schemes. But she forced herself to stand tall, to meet his angry gaze without flinching. "It is exactly what it appears to be, a letter to my father explaining that I will not be marrying you." "Like hell you will not." Preston moved closer, intimidating in his fury. "Do you have any idea how much time and money I have invested in courting you? How many business arrangements I have made based on this marriage? You will go through with it, Helena, or I will make sure your reputation is destroyed so thoroughly that no decent man will ever look at you again." "I do not care about my reputation. I care about not spending my life with a man who sees me as a means to an end." Helena's voice was shaking but determined. Preston's hand shot out and gripped her arm painfully. "You are not going anywhere. The party is tomorrow night, and you will be there smiling at my side. After we are married, you will learn your place quickly enough." The threat in his words was clear, and Helena felt real fear for the first time. She tried to pull away, but Preston's grip tightened cruelly. It was only the sudden entrance of the hotel manager that made him release her. Preston immediately smoothed his expression into something more civilized, but the fury still simmered in his eyes. "We will discuss this further tomorrow, my dear. I am sure you are just having pre-wedding nerves. I will come by in the morning and we can talk reasonably." His tone suggested there would be nothing reasonable about that conversation. Helena fled to her room and locked the door, her mind racing. Preston was not going to let her go easily. He might even try to force her into the marriage somehow. She had to get out, had to reach Wade. She waited until the hotel was quiet, then packed a small bag with her most practical clothes and what money and jewelry she had brought with her. She left everything else behind. Climbing out of a second-story window in a full skirt was no easy feat, but Helena managed it, driven by desperation. She made her way through the dark streets to the livery stable where she knew Wade kept his horse when he was in town. She had just reached the building when a figure stepped out of the shadows, and she nearly screamed before recognizing Wade himself. "Helena, what are you doing out here at this hour?" Then he saw her bag and her disheveled appearance, and his expression hardened. "What happened? Did Ashford hurt you?" Helena told him everything in a rush about the intercepted letter and Preston's threats. Wade's face grew darker with every word, and by the time she finished, his jaw was clenched with barely contained rage. "That son of a... I should have called him out long ago." Wade took a deep breath, visibly controlling himself. "All right. We are leaving tonight. I will take you somewhere safe, somewhere he cannot reach you. But what about your job, the ranch, your life here?" Helena protested even as relief flooded through her. "None of that matters as much as keeping you safe. We will figure out the rest as we go." Wade was already saddling his horse with quick, efficient movements. "There is a mining camp 2 days' ride from here where a friend of mine works. We can go there temporarily until we sort this out." They rode through the night, Wade pushing the pace as much as he dared given that Helena was riding behind him again, and the terrain was treacherous in the dark. By dawn, Pino's Altos was far behind them, and Helena felt like she could finally breathe again. They stopped to rest the horse and eat some of the provisions Wade had grabbed from his saddlebags. "I am sorry," Helena said quietly as they sat in the shade of a rocky outcropping. "I have ruined your life, made you leave everything behind." Wade turned to her with such tenderness in his eyes that Helena's breath caught. "You have not ruined anything. You have given me a reason to want more from life than just working for wages and sleeping in a bunkhouse. I meant what I said, Helena. I want to build a life with you. We will find a place to settle, somewhere far enough from Pino's Altos that Ashford will not bother following. I will work hard, save money, and we will have our own ranch someday. As long as I have you with me, I have everything I need." Helena leaned against him, feeling safer than she had in days despite being in the middle of nowhere. "How did I get so lucky to have you see me that day? What would have happened if you had not warned me about Preston? You would have figured it out eventually. You are too clever not to have seen through him." Wade wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "But I am grateful every day that I was the one who got to open your eyes, that I get to be the one you chose." They reached the mining camp late the following evening. Wade's friend, a grizzled prospector named Samuel, greeted them warmly and asked no awkward questions about their unmarried state or sudden arrival. He offered them his spare cabin, which was tiny but clean, and promised to help Wade find work in the camp. Over the next several weeks, Helena and Wade built a new life in the small, rough settlement. Wade found work helping to shore up mine tunnels, dangerous labor that paid well enough. Helena, despite her wealthy upbringing, proved surprisingly adaptable. She cooked their simple meals, mended their clothes, and even helped tend the small garden that Samuel had started behind his cabin. The work was hard and her hands developed calluses, but she found satisfaction in it that she had never felt in her pampered life back east. They were married by a traveling preacher who came through the camp 6 weeks after their arrival. There was no grand ceremony, no elaborate dress or flowers. Helena wore her simplest calico dress, and Wade's best clothes were still dusty from a day's work. But when they spoke their vows in front of Samuel and a handful of other miners who had become friends, Helena felt more joy than she could have imagined. This was real, this was chosen, and it was hers. Their wedding night was spent in the tiny cabin, and Wade was gentle and patient with Helena's nervousness. He made love to her with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes, whispering how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how grateful he was that she had chosen him. Helena fell asleep in his arms, feeling truly cherished for the first time in her life. The weeks turned into months. Helena received a letter from her father, forwarded through several channels, that was colder than she had hoped but not entirely cruel. He was disappointed in her choices and felt she had made a mistake, but he did not disown her. He would not, however, be providing any financial support, as he felt she had made her bed and must now lie in it. Helena had expected nothing less and found she did not mind. The independence she had gained was worth more than any inheritance. News occasionally reached them from Pino's Altos. Preston had been furious when Helena disappeared, had even tried to pursue them, but Wade had covered their tracks well. The engagement party had turned into an embarrassment for Preston, and his reputation had suffered when word spread about why his betrothed had fled. He had left town a few months later, presumably to find easier prey elsewhere. Helena felt sorry for whatever woman he might target next, but she was grateful he was out of their lives. As winter approached, Wade announced that he had saved enough money for them to move on, to find a piece of land they could claim and start their own ranch. They said goodbye to Samuel and the mining camp that had sheltered them and headed south, toward a valley Wade had heard about where the grazing was good and land was available for homesteading. The land they eventually claimed was beautiful, a small valley with a creek running through it and enough grass to support cattle. They filed the proper claims and began the back-breaking work of building their life from nothing. Wade constructed a small but sturdy cabin, and Helena created a home inside it. They acquired a few head of cattle and some chickens, planted a garden, and slowly built their herd. The work was hard, harder than anything Helena had ever imagined. There were days when her whole body ached, when she was so tired she could barely stand. But there were also moments of profound happiness. Watching the sunrise over their land while drinking coffee with Wade, feeling his baby move inside her when she became pregnant the following spring, seeing the pride in his eyes when they sold their first cattle for a good price. Their son was born in 1880, delivered with the help of a neighboring rancher's wife. Wade held the baby with such tenderness, such wonder, that Helena fell in love with him all over again. They named the boy Samuel, after the friend who had helped them when they needed it most. Life was not easy, but it was good. They faced droughts and difficult winters, times when money was tight and worry kept them awake at night. But they faced it together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. Wade never once made Helena feel like she was less than his equal, always asking her opinion on decisions about the ranch, valuing her input. And Helena never regretted her choice, even on the hardest days. 3 years after Samuel was born, a daughter joined their family. They named her Grace, and she had Helena's dark hair and Wade's golden eyes. Wade doted on both children, teaching Samuel to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and singing Grace to sleep every night with old cowboy songs. One evening, when the children were asleep and Helena and Wade were sitting on the porch watching the stars come out, Helena reflected on how far they had come from that first meeting in Pino's Altos. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not warned me about Preston?" she asked, leaning against Wade's shoulder. "Every day, and it terrifies me. The thought of you trapped in a marriage with that man, never knowing what real love could be." Wade pulled her closer. "I thank God I had the courage to speak up, even though I had no right to interfere." "You had every right. You saved me, Wade. You gave me a life I did not even know I could want." Helena turned to kiss him softly. "I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. The feeling is entirely mutual, Mrs. Xavier." Wade's smile was warm in the fading light. "I am the luckiest man alive." More years passed, bringing more children, 3 more in total, 2 boys and another girl. The ranch grew and prospered, their herd expanding until they were modestly successful by frontier standards. Helena started the school she had once dreamed of, teaching not just her own children but those of neighboring families in a small building Wade constructed near their home. She found purpose in educating these frontier children, giving them opportunities they might not otherwise have had. Wade became known throughout the territory as a fair and honest rancher, someone whose word could be trusted. He hired men when he could afford to, always treating them with respect and paying fair wages. Their children grew strong and healthy, learning the value of hard work and the importance of integrity from their parents' example. Helena occasionally received letters from her father, growing warmer over the years as he aged and perhaps regretted his harshness. When he died in 1890, He left Helena a portion of his estate after all, acknowledging in his will that she had shown more courage and wisdom than he had given her credit for. The money allowed Wade and Helena to expand their ranch significantly and to provide better educations for their children. By 1895, Samuel was 15 and already showing signs of becoming a fine rancher like his father. Grace was 12, with a sharp mind and a love of learning that pleased Helena immensely. The younger children were growing quickly, filling the expanded house Wade had built with noise and laughter. One evening in late summer, Helena and Wade escaped the chaos of their large family for a rare moment alone. They walked to their favorite spot, a rise above the creek where they could see their entire valley spread out before them. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. The house they had built together sat solid and welcoming, smoke rising from its chimney where the older children were preparing dinner. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," Helena said softly, taking in the view. "A real home, a family built on love instead of obligation, a partner who sees me as a person instead of a possession. You gave me all of this, Wade. We gave it to each other." Wade wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You took a chance on a cowboy with nothing but big dreams and a lot of determination. You worked beside me every step of the way to build this life. I could not have done any of it without you." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The same colors Helena had seen from her hotel window that first evening in Pino's Altos all those years ago. She had been so lost then, so uncertain, traveling toward a future that would have destroyed her spirit slowly and surely. Thank God for cowboys with honest eyes and the courage to speak uncomfortable truths. Thank God she had been brave enough to listen, to choose love over security, partnership over position. The life she had now was richer than anything Preston could have offered her, not in money but in the things that truly mattered. Love, respect, family, and the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful with her own hands alongside the man she adored. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, their children's voices calling them in for dinner, Helena knew that every hardship they had faced, every sacrifice she had made, had been worth it. She had found her true home, not in Philadelphia's society or in the wealth her father's mining operations provided, but here in this wild New Mexico valley with the cowboy who had opened her eyes before it was too late. Their love story was not the stuff of fancy novels or romantic poetry, but it was real and true and entirely theirs, built on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and devotion that would last all the days of their lives and beyond.